Hello and welcome to another Hug in the Snug, where today I am joined by Carlos Ludlow-Palafox, I've been practicing that, who is the founder of Enval. And I'll ask you in a minute what that is, but it's called Hug in the Snug.
Okay.
Because we're in the snug, so we have to start with a hug.
Okay. Snug. Cool.
So, very quickly, Enval, you do plastic, aluminium, laminate recycling.
Correct.
And you're developing a totally brand new process for that.
Yeah, it's a process to recycle this kind of materials to recover the aluminium and recover the plastic as chemicals in this kind of packaging.
And is that something that can't be done at the moment?
It's something that is not done at the moment, simply there's no process to do it.
And is there a lot of plastic aluminium laminates out there?
All the toothpaste tubes, cosmetic tubes, coffee bags, Capri Sun pouches.
So all the annoying stuff that we can't recycle at the moment?
A lot of the stuff that we can recycle.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to say for now, good luck with that. And maybe we'll do another Hug in the Snug where you can tell us all about that in more detail. Because today,
Brilliant.
Carlos has a bugbear. And I've said that he can use this platform for us to chat about it.
To take it out of the heart.
Exactly.
Good. It's hurting.
It's hurting your heart. Okay, so we're going to get it out there because it's quite relevant for us, and it's quite relevant for our clients and the people that we connect and work with. So we feel it's about time we got to talk about it. So what is it? What is it that's hurting your heart?
The fact that in the environmental sector we don't have a consistent way of assessing the environmental impact of new processes, services, and products.
So what we call sustainable innovations, the kind of
Correct.
things our clients do, which is new products or new ways of doing things that
Exactly.
are part of a better future.
Yeah.
You're saying we don't always know that
We
they're
don't
part of a
always
better
know.
future.
We not always know whether they are really as good as they say on the tin. Let's say.
Okay.
Yeah. I am convinced that in some cases there are new products that people are putting out in the market that have a negative environmental impact, even though they claim to have a good impact. What we commonly known as greenwash.
Okay, and now is this the kind of greenwashing where actually it's really obvious if you think about it, and people are trying to say it's green by, colouring the package green, but we all know that it's bad, or are there some things out there that we all might believe is a better step, but actually isn't?
I think there are obvious things that you really need to think about it 2 seconds and you realize that it's not the case. But there are things slightly more complicated that definitely look as if they were a good environmental solution. But when you start studying a little bit more in depth, you will realize that it's not as good as it's supposed to be.
Do you have any examples that would help people?
I do. The concentrated detergent, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most things have gone to that.
A lot of things have gone to concentrated detergents, and the fact that is concentrated means that there's less material. Fair enough, it's good because there's less transport. Yeah, you use less, but no one has really assessed the effect of that concentration in terms of the process. So, are you spending a lot more energy to drive more water out of that product? If the answer to that is, well, yeah, you have less product to transport, less product to use, but you used a lot of energy in order to extract that water and make it more concentrated, then the actual environmental impact is negative rather than positive.
Because actually
Overall,
you're using a
in
lot
terms
more
of the whole and the whole purpose of this Hug in the Snug is to talk about life cycle assessment, right?
Okay.
And the fact that unfortunately we still don't have a consistent method in order to assess the impact of the whole supply chain, from cradle to grave, or from cradle to cradle, just closing the loop.
So you're saying what we need is to do life cycle assessments across the board to actually check if when something looks like it might be a great innovation or a great new way of doing things, if overall it is actually better for the environment.
Exactly, that's more or less what I'm saying, and there are methods out there. Yeah, there's and you know them very well. There's something called ISO 14040. There's something that the Carbon Trust has developed, which is called PAS 2050. There are methods to do this. The problem is that A, they are not standardized yet. B, it's not really easy to define where you're going to put a boundary for a given system. Meaning, you will start your life cycle assessment here and you will finish here, and you will get a set of results.
Okay.
And those results might look horrible and might prove that what you're doing is actually not very environmentally friendly. And in strict sense, you should leave the boundary there and try to solve it somehow. But it's also fairly easy to say, okay, instead of putting the boundary here and here, we'll move the boundary this way. And it might not be a lot to change completely the way those results of the life cycle assessment.
If the bit that's having a real impact is,
if the bit
say it's
is
right
just
at the
there,
beginning, like say mining for a product. So if you say, we're not including mining because it's not our responsibility, we're starting with, say, copper, and then we're making our product out of copper.
Then you forget, it looks great, when it might be actually fairly bad. So that lack of standard and that lack of clarity of where you put the boundaries, past 2050 has gone a long way to try to standardize that, but the point is that as society, as companies, etc., we still don't use it properly.
Okay, so there is something out, so if we're trying to solve this, there is something out there that does a pretty good job past 2050. When people do stuff, it is used a lot.
When people do it, but at the end of the day, there's no way of knowing whether people did it right or whether people are kidding themselves. Okay. And unfortunately, if companies don't take their sustainability responsibility seriously, it's just a matter of moving the boundary a little bit, and their results will look completely different, and they will look very good from a sustainability point of view. Now, the issue of certification is a problem because it could just add cost and it add complexity and etc. So I'm not necessarily saying that, having a very strict legislation on how to do this will be the solution, because first of all, it would have to be something that is done worldwide, because if it's enforced in a country and it just increases the cost for production of the products in a country, it will be completely uncompetitive in the rest of the world. Yeah. It has to be something relatively simple that everywhere applies, and very importantly, that public understands. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
So maybe that, because if we're saying one option is kind of we just make worldwide legislation, everyone has to do it, they have to do it to this standard, and we have companies that check they're doing it to that standard, which in a way would be great, but I can see a lot of costs and
that would simply not work.
So you're saying understanding, so maybe there's an argument around if customers but also other businesses understood what was involved in a life cycle analysis.
Correct.
And so they could maybe spot, so that people, it's not so easy to make subtle changes, because someone, if they say, well, how did you do this? And they said, oh, well, we took the copper and we went to recycling. And they say, well, what about the mining?
About the mining? Exactly.
So if they're kind of in the mindset.
Precisely. If public understands that a properly done analysis will have to include everything, and that you cannot just cut corners to make it look nicer, the right questions will be put to the companies that are presenting this information. And therefore, if they don't have the right answer, people will be able to spot that, easier than now at the end of the day.
So let's help everyone out.
Yeah.
Brief stop for a life cycle assessment. What should it cover? What are the stages, so that if someone's doing some greenwashing, we can spot it?
It should include all the steps that the production of that product or the delivery of that service include, and that really means everything. The materials that it uses from the scratch, the products the processes that involve the extracting those materials in the first place, the processes that involve the transformation of those raw materials into the final product, the transportation of those materials, where they are, where they come from, how much energy it takes to move them from one place to another. There's the typical example of why do we have food that comes from the other side of the world that gets transported in our place? That's a very good one. People actually can understand that fairly easy. If we are transporting fresh fruit from the other side of the world, there is an environmental aspect to that. Now, obviously, carbon footprinting and the effect of gases being generated by transport, etc., is not the whole picture, but at least it gives an idea that certain products or services will be better than others. Yeah, and in answer to your question, it really has to encompass everything. Yeah, obviously there will be things that are negligible and that you don't need to go to the fine detail.
Like how many paper clips?
How many paper clips were
Yeah.
used in the receipt? Obviously, that's not going to have an impact. But there has to be a serious understanding of the process, of the processes that are used to produce something, in order to know whether there's something that is important or whether something that you can not take into account.
So if we're thinking in your new perfect world where we get all this sorted out, for how consumers can help us get there, is kind of using a bit of sort of creative and logical thinking of if you're trying to work out, should I buy this one or this one, or if someone says in an advert, oh, it's our greenest X ever, actually just sit down and use your own thinking to think, okay, let's think of the start to the end of this process. So with the concentrated, they read on the package saying, half the amount of emissions used in transport, and they think, brilliant. Then they can maybe stop and think, oh, I wonder about...
hang on, how did they get to that?
How did they get there? How was it made? Is it different materials? Is it worse at the end going into the water? Is it doing damage? So just really thinking a bit more widely about the things
Think a bit more widely. Thinking about not only about materials, and that's actually very important. Process sometimes is the easiest part of things, but nevertheless, people don't necessarily think about the process. They think about the material because it's what we can touch, not necessarily how the product ended up in the shape it ended up in. And another thing is what the function of certain things is. For example, packaging. In packaging, that is typical. People don't like the fact that we can buy cucumbers in a plastic wrap. Okay, they don't like it. Say, why do cucumbers need to come in a plastic wrap? Now, it's perfectly demonstrable with a proper done LCA that a cucumber will last 13 days with a plastic wrap, and it will last 2 days without a plastic wrap. Okay, that means that we have a bunch of cucumbers that, if didn't have plastic wrap, would go off, would be completely spoiled before we can get them. And the waste of food, if that was the case, would be several times what it is, simply because we use plastic. So yeah, it's horrible to have another piece of plastic, fine, but there is a purpose of that plastic wrap, and that is seen if you do a proper analysis that encompasses the whole life cycle of that product on the different scenarios, with or without packaging.
So it's really moving from thinking about what's here and right now to thinking about the whole process.
Life.
So let's put it to our clients and our friends and partners. If you have a product or a service or a new innovation that you believe is better for the environment, is a better way of doing things, then do the study and prove it, and then you'll know. But also you can communicate about it,
and your customers will know.
Which is we love. You can say it, and it's not just this seems better, this might be better.
Exactly.
This is better. Here are the numbers. We've checked it out. We're doing
There's some science behind it. Don't be afraid of the science.
Don't be afraid of the science. I like that. All right. Well, thank you very much.
On the contrary,
thank you very much. I hope this makes my heart feel a bit lighter.
It is.
All right. Great.
All right. Thank you.